So today we are going to be continuing off of our work with color theory. Last time we were together, we created a color wheel and we worked with watercolor to make value scales. So today we're going to be dealing with complements, and you can feel free to do this on the back of your sheet from last class, or you can grab a nice new sheet of paper, whichever you like. Our supplies that we need, we're going to use the same brush as last time, so I just have a simple round brush. Mine says 6 on it. You can grab the 6 or the 4 depending on what you like to work with. Our watercolors, water filled about halfway to 3/4, and then paper towel that's kind of bundled up so it's a little bit thicker. So I also have a pencil and eraser in case I need to do any labeling, which I will. Today we're going to be doing complements. So we're going to write that down. So comple with an E, ments. And complements are opposite each other on the color wheel. So if I bring our color wheel out, we're going to deal with the 3 primary colors first, and then their opposites. So we are going to be mixing red and green together. We are going to be mixing yellow and violet together, and then finally we're going to mix orange and blue. But you also have the tertiary colors. So you have, if you take your pencil or whatever across this wheel, if you set it up correctly, you have red orange is the opposite of blue green. And then going down, we have blue violet is the opposite of yellow orange, and then lastly we have red violet is the opposite of yellow green. So it's the same ones. For example, red and green are opposites. So if I have red over here, I have to have green on this side. Yellow and violet are opposites. So I have yellow here and I have violet over there. So hopefully as we go through this, we'll get a little bit more used to figuring out what our complements are. There's a sort of easy way to chart that out. So if you go red, orange, yellow, right? Those are your 3 top colors, and then finish the rainbow out, you have green, blue, and violet. So these are your pairs. So red and green, orange, blue, yellow, and violet. If you mix 2 colors that are next to each other, so red and orange, right? Then you get the opposite, which is blue and green, but we always do the primary colors first. So red, blue, and yellow would be our primary colors. You can also fill out the whole thing. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and then you can like try to figure out what they are based on that, but you have to kind of start in a weird place. So like yellow, orange, red, and then you go violet, blue, green. So you kind of cut it in half no matter what. So I think that this top part is a little bit easier. So today we're going to prove that when you add complements to each other, you get what are called neutral colors. So these aren't usually people's favorite colors from the rainbow. So you have like red and green. We're going to create some browns and grays. Same with, red and green. We're going to create some like browns and kind of gray colors. Same with yellow and violet, blue and orange. And then we'll just kind of quickly show what these tertiary colors mix to as well. So let's begin with our paints. If your set at the top isn't clean, or your tray, palette, whatever, isn't clean, then you're gonna have to wet it and give it a quick scrub. So that's if you weren't paying attention last time when I said to clean. That is something you're gonna have to do. Wipe off my brush to keep my water as clean as possible. We always want the cleanest water that we can when we're doing watercolors. And today it might get a little bit muddy as we're doing this. So I'll wipe that out. Be careful in like the way corners. That's where the pigment and the paints tends to get stuck. If you're noticing that your tray, especially if the white one, is getting stained, that's okay. That's just naturally going to happen because of the pigment. So next we need to also get our colors hydrated. So grab some water. And then today we're going to be using a lot of the different colors. There's one set, if you have mine, that doesn't come with that violet color. So we are going to have to make ourselves a violet eventually. Hopefully remember how to do that and what colors make that. But I'm going to get basically all the rainbow colors hydrated. Remember, I pretend that those last two don't exist if you have the same set as me. I'm not really going to be using my browns or my black today, so just the rainbow colors that you see there. Okay. So we're going to start with our secondary colors today. So we always focus on primary colors. Let's start with the secondary ones for now. So our secondary colors, if you look at our beautiful color chart, you can see that upside down triangle is where our secondary colors are. So we have orange, green, and violet. And so it doesn't really matter which order we go in, but I'm gonna go in that same order, kind of clockwise, starting from the top. So I'm going to go from orange, and its opposite is going to be blue. Then I had green, and that opposite is red, so think like Christmas. And then finally at the bottom I have violet, and that opposite is yellow. So we'll start with getting some pure colors down, and then eventually transition and then hit that pure color again for your primaries and your secondaries. So all these are secondary. I guess I could just write secondary. And these are primary. And in the middle, we're going to hit what are called neutral colors. So neutral means like neither here nor there. So to start out with, let's get our orange. If you have a set with this nice bright orange color, then you're gonna grab that. Again, directly from the pan is fine. Just make sure it's clean. And you can do circles, you can do squares. I'm just a sucker for squares because they have that kind of nice hard edge at the end, so saves a little bit more space if I do a square. We're gonna try to get all the way to the blue. It doesn't really matter how many squares it takes us to get there. If you wanna adjust that later, then that's fine. But we're gonna slowly be mixing our blue into our orange. So we start up at the top as usual, get some water in there so that we make enough paint, and then add some color. So we want this to be pretty saturated. That means it's gonna have quite a bit of color in it, but we still want to have like a nice puddle, yeah? So we don't want that to be too dry. Next, I'm gonna wipe off my brush so that I don't get too much in my blue. Out of the two blues here, remember that one of them is a little bit more green, so it'll say like cyan, or it'll say like Prussian blue if you have the other one. But you want the one that's closer to like the purple. And so I'm gonna take this, which is my ultramarine, and just slowly add it into here. So what you're going to get, especially if you have this kind of very bright orange, there's another set that has a darker orange, but you might get some stuff that looks like pumpkins. You might also get a set where your orange is a little bit redder, and that tends to look a lot nicer, so it starts to get very dark instead. And I will show you what that set looks like in a little bit. So I'm gonna slowly be adding until I get to blue. It doesn't matter if I get like all the way to the end here, but I do want to end with a very pure blue. So dip my brush in some more blue. It's going to shift to kind of a greener color. So if you can tell, this orange is like pretty bright, yeah? So it's not like in the middle orange. So since it has so much yellow in it, the yellow and the blue together create these kind of greens. So you get like an army green color. It's gonna almost approach teal. If you're running out of paint, then remember you can always just grab a little bit more. Definitely like a darker green now. Again, if you have a different orange, it's probably going to look a little bit more like black or gray. At this point, we're almost going to get like a teal color, but like a really neutral one, or like a super dark green. You can see I'm almost running out, so I want to get a mostly blue one at this point. And this one kind of reminds me of the color of jeans. There we go. And then I'll do my pure blue right at the end there. So if your blue is not very clean anymore, you want to make sure you grab from a clean part, maybe clean it out with your water. And add that in the back there. And there we have a scale. Okay. So now that we've done that, we're going to use our greens. I'll leave a little bit of room over here so at the end you can see what it looks like when I use the other set, but most people have a set that comes like this. So we're gonna go from green to red now. And out of the two greens that we have, this one has too much yellow in it, so I like to use this green here and then your red. So let's start with a green, just a pure one. This probably isn't gonna have quite as many squares, but you wanna get anywhere from like, well, how many do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in between. So like 3 to 5 in between is fine. Try not to go beyond that, but if you have room, it's fine. So I have green. Again, I'm gonna make a decent sized puddle up at the top. Base it off of what happened last time. So if you didn't have enough paint last time, then, you know, add more water and more paint back in there. And then this time we're adding red. So wipe off so I don't get too much green in my red. Add a little bit of that and then adjust it. A little bit more so it changes. So first I'm gonna get kind of a darker green. Add more red to that. This should shift pretty gray almost, so brown or gray. So it's still getting kind of darker as we go along. So it's still mostly green. So definitely getting grayer. In the middle, I'll probably have a pretty nice brown or gray color. And I don't want to be scraping to try and get paint, but there should be still a puddle essentially. And if these are really light, you can dot it. And I grab some paint and dot back in there. So you see this one's kind of super gray. Wipe off, hydrate that a little more. Now we're going to be a lot closer to red. So we'll get something a little bit browner. So it's getting a little bit warmer as it gets towards the red. So instead of like these kind of middle grays, you're gonna get something that looks more like red. This color, I say, kind of reminds me of bricks, this next one. And then we'll get our pure red in there. So watercolors are pretty sensitive to anything that you add to them. Most paint is. So you always want to be aware of what you're adding. So let's completely clean off our brush. Get a nice clean part of your red if it's kind of messed up, or clean it out. And paint that down nice and bright. Now our last one is violet to yellow. So if you have a yellow and a violet, the set doesn't have a violet, then you can just use the purple that you have. So it'll say violet on it, and you can start with that, head towards yellow. You can start with yellow and go towards violet because yellow is a little bit brighter. This set does not have a violet though, so we do need to be very careful about mixing one first. So what you want to do is get your magenta ready and your blue. And that's really if you only have this set. And you want to make yourself quite a bit of that violet color. So really get a lot of magenta, make a decent pile, and we want this to be fairly bright. So we want to add quite a bit of pigment or paint at the top. See that I'm starting with the magenta. And then I'm going to grab some of the blue and mix that in so I get this really beautiful purple color. So you want enough of this that you're not going to run out while you're mixing, because if you try to make that same purple again, it's probably not going to be exactly the same. So you want a really nice purple. Paint that down. This one I'm going to make a little bit smaller because as I go to yellow, sometimes I can get a lot of colors in there because you're getting one of the darkest colors plus one of the lightest ones. So now that I have that, wipe that off, rehydrate my yellow because it's been a while since we started initially. I think I have to clean that out a little bit too. So I'm just going to scrape any of the extra. Go into my yellow. And because it's, you know, like technically kind of weaker, it's not going to shift it too much. So get a decent amount of yellow to mix in there. And then paint that down. So hardly different to start out with. And we're going to just keep going. For this, we're going to get quite a bit of brown. So both of these colors are kind of warmer. If you made yours a little bit on the bluer side, you might get something that looks kind of greener, actually. Rehydrate. Oops, that didn't shift quite as much as I'd like. There you go. Have like kind of a honey color now. I can fit one more. So mostly yellow, just a little bit of that violet color. And go back in and make that one a little darker. And then finally a pure yellow. So at this point, if that's dirty, then you want to fix it and clean it out. But if not, then you're good to go. So this yellow, if you end with it, will be a real good test to see if you've been doing a good job cleaning. If you haven't, then it's not going to look very nice. So there you go. That's all of the secondary and primary colors mixed together to create a nice set of neutrals in the center. Once you have that, we're also going to experiment with the tertiary colors. So red, violet, and yellow, green, blue, green, red, orange, and yellow, orange, and blue, violet. You can do those in essentially whatever order you want to, but this requires a lot of mixing up at the top. So I am going to clean this out. At this point, also check on your water. If your water's looking kind of dirty, then you'll probably need to get some new water before we move on to the next part. since we still want to get some really nice bright colors. Alright, if we want to, we can also do our pre-labeling. So we're going to do 3 separate boxes. So here and here, morning. And then we want to get our red violet and our yellow green started. So on here, we need to grab the magenta. That's pretty close to the red violet. We're just going to add like a tiny bit of blue so we get that. And then we can paint it down. Oops. So red violet. And honestly, that bright green that you have is a pretty good yellow green. So we can immediately grab from there and paint that down. So those are your opposites. Now I want to show you what happens when you mix them. So taking from that pile that we mixed at the top, we're going to do our best to get a very neutral color. So at this point, I'm expecting this will look kind of like a brown. It'll be a little bit on the brighter side because of that particular one that we're using, but after you have the one brown, then that should be all you need. If you want to mix a couple of swatches of them, then you can, so you can go back in and you can make this a little bit more violet and see how that shifts it, but you really only need the one in the middle. So you can get one that looks a little bit more like that. If you want to experiment, you can get one that looks a little bit greener. But those are just some neutrals that we add together. So now that we know the format, we can mark these down. This is my red violet. And yellow green. Over on this side, we're gonna do blue-green, and then that opposite is red-orange, and then over here we're going to do yellow-orange, and that opposite is blue-violet. At the bottom, we're going to end up with neutrals again. So let's start. Mix our blue-green. For this one, remember we want to use that other blue that we had, the Prussian or the cyan. Mix that with a little bit of the dark green to get that teal color. Paint that down. Then we also want to mix our red and orange together. If you have the darker orange, then it's actually pretty good to go already. So I'll use kind of the side over here. Rehydrate that. That should be good. Red, orange. And let's mix them together and see what happens. So I'll add a little bit of blue into here. I get that neutral. I can make it slightly more blue. Let's try to make one that's mostly red-orange. So there are some neutrals of that. And then finally, let's do our yellow-orange. Again, this is pretty good for yellow-orange, the really bright one, but we want to add a tiny bit of yellow to it. Just gonna clean that out real quick. But get a decent pile of it, puddle of it. And paint that down. And we'll make a blue-violet. So for this one, if you have this set, then it's a lot of blue, a little bit of magenta. Remember to use the kind of ultramarine blue. Try to mix that up at the top, but if you don't have room for it, then just clean out something. Lots of blue. A little bit of magenta. Mostly blue. Paint that down. And let's experiment with mixing these. Again, you're gonna get some kind of squashy colors probably. Should shift pretty dark though. And again, you really only need the one. All right, and that is how to practice going from your different complements to each other and create those neutrals.